We're learning the Maimer Moshe Yadaber. So the pasuk says, Moshe Yadaber, v'halikim ya'anenu b'kol. Moshe speaks and God responds. Ya'anenu means to respond, like the word ya'aneh. B'koyle shal Moshe, to the voice of Moshe. So Lahavin, we have to understand. Kiloi perish because of Ma Dibur Moshe doesn't say anything what Moshe said. Uma Anohu Hashem, and what did Moshe Hashem respond? And the Rebbe says, assumingly, people would say that maybe the Rebbe, the pasuk's talking about the Aseret Adibros, but you can't say that. The Loi Kai al Aseret Adibros, we can't say that we're talking about the Ten Commandments. Because the first two commandments, Moshe didn't say them. God spoke through Moshe. God said them directly. And like Moshe himself says in Ve'eschanan, when he describes Matan Torah, Bein Hashem uvein Nechem lahagid, to say over the words, but not that Moshe was saying and God was responding. So it's clearly that Moshe, when it comes to the Ten Commandments, it's not that Moshe was the speaker. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ha'oinen, and that God is the responder. So what is this verse referring to? Again, and this verse is not like there's happenings after this verse. Moshe, the Rashi says, Moshe goes down. Like it's not seconds before Matan Torah that we have this verse. There's other things that the Torah describes after this verse. V'gam lahavin, also to understand, ma yudaber u'ma anenu. What does it mean to speak and what does it mean to respond? Because the question is lashon asid. The wording is he's going to speak. Yudaber, he's going to speak. Yanenu, he's going to respond. Lashon asid ayhoiva. It seems like it's future tense or present. Shuv said Moshe Diber, Moshe spoke. HaKadosh Baruch Hu no, and God responded to him. So the Rebbe says like this. So the idea is like this. So basically, this is a pasuk that describes Matan Torah. It says, Isa Gemara, the Gemara teaches us a famous saying of Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef was one of the heads of the yeshiva in the times of Rabbah, teachers of Rav and Abaya. He says, Ilav ha-yoima, if not for this day, meaning Matan Torah, the day of giving of the Torah. The Kagorim, Kama Yosef Ikebeshuk, if not for what this day accomplished, how many Yosefs, referring to himself, his name is Yosef, how many Yosefs would just be in the market? Meaning to say, anything about me that is unique, possibly, and he was the head of the yeshiva in the times of the Gemara, is because of Matan Torah. If not, I would just be another Yosef in the Shuk. Lahavin, Milas Ha-Yoima, what does he mean this day? Dafka Shehu Matan Torah. Why is it Matan Torah that made Rabbi Yosef into who Rabbi Yosef is? Matan Torah. And also, not just what is this day for Rabbi Yosef that it affected that he's not just another Yosef in the shuk, in the market, but what does it mean, the giving of the Torah? Why? What's the question? Avram himself kept all the Torah before it was given. And the Gemara tells us even the rabbinic laws of making an Erev Tafshilin for allowing himself to cook between Shabbos and Yom Tov and Shabbos. Mipnei Shalom is called Torah, meaning he learned the whole Torah. That's how he was able to perform the whole Torah. Until it was given. So what happened in Matan Torah? Like it says, Vayishmar Mishmarti Mitzvah Seichu Kaisai V'Taraisi. That it talks about Avram Avinu, that he kept all the mitzvahs and chukim of the Torah. Ubevade, and we have to assume surely that Yitzchak was taught Torah as well. Yitzchak limit the Yaakov, and Yitzchak taught Yaakov. We know also other places. Rashi brings Yaakov went to yeshiva, Uvanav, and Yaakov taught to his sons. And we know that the yeshiva stayed all the way through Egypt as well. So what happened that changed with the giving of the Torah? That's known. Inin ha-mitzvahs, what is a mitzvah? The Ramach Pikudim, the 248 positive commandments, Inun, they are Rimach Evarim de Malka. They are representing the 248 limbs of the king, like we learned in Tanya. And each limb is connected to a mitzvah, meaning the way Hashem comes into an image of man. L'chura, Eini Muvan, Lashon Evarim. How could we say that God has limbs? He doesn't have an image. It's just a description that they saw an image, but it's not that God is God forbid Chas v'Shalom and has an image, has a goof, as a body. So what does it mean that the 248 commandments connect to the 240 limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Achiyuv, it's known. Al pi ma shekosav b'Zohar, what the Zohar teaches us. They call Ma'isa mitzvahs, The whole point of a mitzvah, the whole idea of doing a mitzvah, is hein la'askana raza deshmaya. La'askana from the word tikkun, to fix the secret of the name. Shemitzvah zu, every mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah is, mamshech shem zeh, brings down a certain name of Hashem into the world. Umitzvah zu, and another mitzvah, mamshech shem zeh, brings another name down. That means with each time a person does a mitzvah, brings down the name of Hashem, and the names of Hashem have different characteristics, like we're going to say. Top page 15, the idea is, the names of Hashem are Shiva Shmoisav She'enim Chakim. The main names are the 7 names that are not allowed to be erased, meaning if they're written, you can't erase them. What is the idea of a name? The idea of a name is hispashtus hachayis, to bring down the vitality, life, v'hashpa, and the flow, l'ishavis midoisav, to create the attributes Yisbarach of Hashem. Meaning when you bring down a name, you bring down that there should be the concept of the midah. The midah itself doesn't exist. God doesn't have midas, like we said before. He surely doesn't have a body. But by describing God in a certain midah attribute, it creates the attribute, meaning kindness, severity, beauty. Like we say, L'cha Hashem ha'gedula, gedula's chesed, v'ha'gevura, v'ha'tiferes. That it says in Divrei Yomim that when we describe Hashem in these ways, then Hashem manifests in these ways. That's what it means, l'sakin shema, to fix the name, means to manifest that Hashem should express himself in the concept of the kelim, in the concept of the midas, of the attributes. And what we're bringing down is only a manifestation, it's only a name. Just like the name of a person isn't the essence of the person, it's just a description, especially if it's a descriptive name, like a doctor or a lawyer. And even a personal name is only for the person to be able to call them. If you want to call someone or talk about someone, you have to say, you can't say that person, because that person could only work a few times. If you have every person's called that person, you never be able to describe someone. So we give names to people so we can know who we're talking about. Or when we want to call someone, we call the person by that name. Because what does it mean that we have to create the name or to fix the name? Hashem himself. Ram Venisa is elevated beyond any kind of description and beyond any kind of manifestation of the description. Means when we call a person a kind person, it's not just that we're calling the person a kind person because that's a name. We're describing that person as being kind. So by describing God as being kind, we're giving a description to God, but he's beyond the description. He's beyond being defined. Hey, Beth, he's beyond being defined as kind. As the Zohar explains, Lav mikol ilain midis klal. God has no attributes. It means he's not defined by being a kind God or a severe God. Like it says in the Zohar, we say this every Friday night before Ma'ariv, the Antu Chakim, even the wisdom of God, is not in a known way. It means when you describe someone as being smart, it means we could define wow, this person's smart. So we understand smart, and we define the person as being smart. God is we don't understand what it means to describe God as smart, because the smartness that's attributed to God is beyond any of our comprehension. What's known and recognized as smart by a person, by creation, not just people, but also all creations. That we call this person or God in this case to be smart. And what do we understand as a person or something that's smart is the person's ability to understand intellectual concept. A person who can comprehend and of course communicate something smart is a person who we call smart. A person who's gathered information over years of studying is a person who's smart. A person who's properly knows how to understand the situation because of their tools that they have is smart. So that's how we describe someone as smart. That description doesn't apply to God. It's not because God is, though we understand as smart is attributed to Hashem. Because forget about smart. Smart is, everyone thinks. But some people think smarter thoughts and some people think less smart thoughts. So even the concept of thinking, the machshava of God, it's beneath smarts. Why? Like I said, because then you could think stupid thoughts also. Nemer aleha, We talk when we describe God's thinking process. The prophet Isaiah says, "Ki lo machshavos machshavos." The way you understand thought is not the way God thinks. And not that after we say what we're saying now, that God has no attributes and there's no wisdom that we understand, there's no thought that we understand, and therefore we're going to come and answer you, what is it? We don't know what it is. It means there's no answer that we're going to say that now we know what it is. We still don't know what it is. But we're telling you it's definitely not what you think it is. Not every it means we don't have to know what something is for it to be. So just because it is doesn't mean we have to know what it is. But one thing we definitely do know it is that we don't know what it is. It exists. That's what the Rambam says. It exists, but beyond our comprehension. That's what the prophets are always describing God. Not the way I think. Not the way I think is the way you think. We don't. Your thinking process is not the same. So why do we use the name of smart or thinking when it comes to God if we don't even know what we're describing? Because some way or another, hey Ariel, some way or another, what comes down eventually in this world as being smart or thinking trickles down, but not in any kind of direct way from what's called smart and wisdom and thinking by God, but not in a way that we understand. That's what we say, Antu chacham, you're smart, not in a way that we understand what smart is. Like the verse says, meaning what is the verse describing? The verse is describing how does every attribute come from Hashem? Ki imcha, from within you, makor chayim is the source of life. Be'orcha, in the light that you have, nira or is the light that we see. Means it's your light is the source of the lights that we have. The manifestations of Hashem comes from you, but not in a way that we don't understand the connection, the chain of events. Pirush be'orcha, what does it mean, your light? Kishenimshach or lamata, when light of God manifests down into creation. We understand what it means to have wisdom and thinking in our own lives. Because anything that exists comes from Hashem. But we don't, it's not that from that we could say, now I understand what it means God's a smart God, or that now I understand what God's thinking. And therefore, when not every time when the prophet says, my thinking is not your thinking, that your conclusions of things, right? We think about things. It doesn't make sense. Why would God do this? Or why does this happen in the world? A lot of questions that we have in our thinking, God says, your thinking and my thinking are not the same. Yes, your thinking comes from my thinking. The ability to think comes from God. But the structure of it, of why we think certain ways, it's not the same structure. And it's beyond our comprehension. That's what it means when God tells Moses, when he sees Rabbi Akiva dying, being murdered, be quiet. This is the way it is. You don't understand it. That's the higher levels of midos. That's the intellect. What about the emotions? How we understand kindness is not the kindness of God. So too when it comes to kindness. So the literal translation when we describe that God does kindness to the thousands, that means that kindness that thousands of people, so to say, or things benefit. The Alter Rebbe says, no, that's not what it means, the thousands, because thousands, it's compact numbers. It means it multiplies by 1,000. There's thousands of levels. There's many contractions and flow until chesed comes manifest as chesed. So it's 1,000 times upwards. Like it says that Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, gave a 3,000 examples about something. It's not that he gave 3,000 examples about the same topic, and you could understand the same topic through any one of the 3,000 examples. You would have to climb the ladder of 3,000 examples to understand what Shlomo Melech was talking about. Each example was a step forward of the example before it. Same thing with chesed. God created the world with chesed. It was created. We have to create the concept of chesed, but we understand as kindness is a creation. So what he's going back to, this is what it means, that the sakin es Hashem, that we have to bring the name down, means we have to bring the concept of what's called chesed, God's beyond any description. So to bring it into what's called kindness is the sakin Hashem. That's why we do the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs is when we do an act of kindness, when a person reaches into their pocket or their purse and gives $1 or tzedakah, or does any kind of action. That's the idea of the pulling of the limbs of God, is you're creating, but you creating in our world the space of kindness that brings God into the concept of kindness. Even though it starts from a much higher level in the kindness that we may not understand. And sometimes what God's acts of kindness to us, we may not appreciate it. But the concept of kindness has to come from us doing acts of kindness, because God's beyond any kind of description of kindness. And that's what he said. And how do we bring this flow down? How do we bring down that there should be the beginnings of the concept of wisdom, the beginning of the concepts of kindness? We have to bring that energy into the 7 names of God that describes him like any name describes a person. So too, these names we describe, when we say the name Kel, when we say the name Kel to describe God, it's describing the kindness of God. Havaya b'nikud pasachu b'chachma, when it's Havaya with a patach, a patach under the hay, it's describing God's wisdom. V'shem Kel, and the name Kel describes God's kindness. How do we know that Kel is Chesed? Because the verse tells us that. In Tehillim chapter 52 says, Chesed Kel Kol Hayom, that God's kindness is all the time, the whole day. So therefore we know that the name Kel describes God as a kind God. Again, these are all the descriptions. And just like a description of a person, a name of a person, we don't really know the essence of a person by calling someone a doctor. That's even a more external name than a person's personal name. But even calling a person a doctor, that describes the person as a person of medicine, let's say, you don't know who the person really is. That as an individual, the character of the person. There's many different types of doctors, not just in the field of medicine, but who they are as people. And even if you describe someone by a personal name, that this is a name attributed to you as who you are, we don't know who the person is just because we know the person's name. You can't say, oh, this person's name is John, this person's name is Mendy, then he must be such a person. But that's before. But when we do bring down the light, that should manifest as in a way of kindness, v'chachma, and wisdom. It's not that God becomes separate from being kind and wise. By coming into the vessels, this is a concept that God is one with his vessels. That even though he's beyond being described, he becomes a God of kindness. He becomes one with the concept. This is what it means that God and his description and his life force is one. God and his vessels are one. And so that's a chiddush. That's a concept. It means the ability for God to be described as kind is not that he's abstract from it, and it's like he's doing the motions of kindness. He becomes a kind God, where just like a kind person feels the need to be kind. You feel I want to be kind, or you feel the pain of another person because you're a kind person and you're a sensitive person. God becomes sensitive and kind as it defines, so to say, his personality. Like the Rambam says, he is the knowledge and he is what knows. That's what we say. To you is greatness. To you is gvura, severity. This becomes who God is, and that's why we say that when God shows himself as being great and shows himself as being gvura, it's a yerida, it's a descent for him. He lowers himself to be defined. And why was he do it? As a response to us. And this is basically the whole mimer. The whole mimer is that this is what Avram didn't do. Avram and Yitzchak weren't able to bring down that when a person gives tzedakah, when a person acts a certain way, you're affecting God. And that's what that verse is, that Moshe spoke, and God responded. God responds to us. How we are, God responds. Moshe speaks, that's a verse on behalf of all the Jewish people. That when you speak, how you do things, how you act, God responds. God responds to the voice of Moshe. Now he continues. How does it happen that we bring down the infinite, means no limit, of godliness to enclose himself, to become described as being kind and wisdom, and not just acts of kindness, but being kind? That's way beyond God, that he should lower himself to such a description. Like we say, Antu Chakam, like we quoted before, the Zohar that says, you're smart, not in a way that we know. Lav mikol idas v'lav mikol midas ilin klal, and God has no midas, has no attributes. is bisirusa deltata talia milsa. It's dependent on us. The sirusa deltata means on an awakening from below. How you act, God responds. And God told us how to act. God said, you want to know how to make me kind? Do acts of kindness. What's the pasuk say? The pasuk says, Zayreya, we say this in davening the whole time. Zayreya tzedakahs matzmiach yeshuas. You plant tzedakahs, you plant acts of kindness, is going to grow salvation. It's not like a person says, "Oh, I have to give tzedakah, I have to give charity." Wait a little bit. My check is coming in. I'll give a little more. Yeah, of course you can wait a little bit till you want to give a little more. But it's just like you can't say, "I'm not going to plant this season. I'm just let's wait for the harvest to come, and then I'll have much more seeds, so I can plant much more." Well, then you're not going to have the seed. You're not going to have anything that's going to grow because you didn't plant anything. Same thing, Zareya tzedakahs matzmiach yeshuas. It's just the way it works. If you plant tzedakahs, you plant actions, not just tzedakah charity, but any action. Tzedakah is a general name for all mitzvahs. If you plant, there's something going to grow. Matzmiach yeshuas. If you don't plant, there's nothing growing. Same thing. V'sarusa deltata tali milsa. You want to bring God into the name of kindness, and He becomes one with that name. It's dependent on you. He told us how to do it. That's the mitzvahs and the Torah, but it's dependent on you. Shaidei mitzvah, when a person does a mitzvah, shehi b'chachma, which is mitzvah that's represented by the concept of chachma, mamshech arin seif baruch hu b'chachma, then you're bringing God down into the description of chachma. Shaidei mitzvah chesed, and when you do something that's kind, the way God told you to do something kind, and you're doing it because God told you this is an act of kindness, God gives us the description. We can't decide on our own what's kind. That brings down God into the concept of chesed, of kindness. This is what it means to bring down and to make the names of God. These are the names of God. And how God encloses himself in what's understood as a concept of wisdom, chesed or kindness, which, like you said before, it's havaya b'nikat pasach b'chachma. But the way we write different ways of Hashem's name is a description if God is coming down in a way of chachma or in a way of chesed, all those things, but it's dependent on us. And that's why, for instance, tefillin is represents the concept of chachma. That's why we put it on our head. So when we put on tefillin, and we says zichron, we mentioned their memory it's something in the brain. It brings down the concept of zikaron by Hashem, of memory by Hashem. That's why it says a lot of times it says that when God remembered, He never forgets. What does it mean He remembered? He remembered Noach. There has to be. Sometimes God takes initiation, and sometimes God's responsive. It's not always that God's responsive. Sometimes God initiates to make us to move us along. So we should do what we have to do. So this continues. Hey, Shana, we're on page 15 in the middle, talking about the uniqueness of Matan Torah. We're on the left-hand side of page 15, second paragraph in the bottom. And now we understand what it means that a mitzvah is a limb of Hashem, of the king. Just like this vitality specifically for every limb. The eye sees and the hand feels. That becomes one. That's properly, if the neshama, if the soul of the person properly enters the person, functioning properly in each limb of the body, right? If you can have the power to see in your hand, so it's not a tool of seeing. So what's going to happen? You're not going to see and you're not going to move because that's different. The power to see has to go into the eyes. That's the tool to seize. The power to pick up something or to write something is in the hand. So the soul's ability to do things, what we call doing things, is in the hand. That's why it's called, mitzvahs are called the commandments of the limbs of the king. It's just like the soul encloses itself. In different limbs of the person. For example, until the person becomes a live person. You're not a soul and body. You become a person. So too, so if the infinite light, which we said is beyond description of midos, when we do things to bring down the name of Hashem, what we say is wisdom and kindness as an example. Are chesed and chachma, and then there's the byproducts of each one of them until God becomes one with that concept. But now we understand. So now we know what Torah and mitzvahs is. And now the question is, we still have the question, but Avram did that also, because it says he did mitzvahs. So what happened to Matan Torah? So in general, there's three answers. To say outside, there's three answers that between Avram Avram and after before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah, let's say. One is how high you draw down. Second one is how low you bring it down. It means what's the source and how low could you go? In general, the theory in Kabbalah and Hasidus is that everything's a circle, right? So a smaller circle starts lower and goes lower, doesn't go as far. A bigger circle, if you're putting them, let's say one circle into a small circle, a smaller circle, a bigger circle, if something starts higher, it goes lower. A larger circle goes lower. And a smaller circle starts lower, but it doesn't go so low. So the same, as far as something higher something starts, the lower it could go. So if Avram Avinu is only starting on a lower level, so he only could bring it to a lower level. Therefore, he can't bring it down to this world. Okay. So we say like this. Now I understand. What does it mean that Avram did mitzvahs? It says Vayishmor Mishmati Mitzvah. The verse says he did it. He did mitzvahs. The Torah tells us about. God says that Yitzchak about his Yitzchak's father Avram. The Hainu. Shegarim said mitzvahs, but he said a mitzvahs to bring down godliness, to create the name. But he created the name on a different level. The Hainu Shegarim, you read this from Shachas Ayin Seif Baruch Hu, that he brought down the infinite light, which is beyond description, into description. To bring it into what we know as wisdom and kindness. He became a chariot to God. This is the third answer. The difference is that Avram was so high that he, as a person, as an individual, he was able to do mitzvahs that we are not. For order for us to do it, we needed Matan Torah. We're not on level of Avram. Avram is a self-made man, right? He lived in a time where people knew Noach. He lived until he was 48, but it didn't matter what people thought. So Avram Avinu was able to become a chariot without Matan Torah. That's a third answer. So one is that he was on a higher level. Second one is he started from a low. He only brought down godliness from a lower level. And third one is he only brought it to a higher level. He wasn't able to bring into this world. Okay. So he says, the Hainu Shigami, read this of Amshachasar and Seif Baruch Hu, is Abshus of Mitzvah Chacham Chesed. Like it says that Avram Avinu became a chariot to the concept of love, which says Halach v'noiseh negva. What does it mean? The Torah testifies about Avram that he traveled south. South is where love is, and so if south is where love is, Avram can't constantly travel till the south, towards the south. And this is an amazing concept. The Alter Rebbe talks about this in the Maimarim of Yisro. I'll say it outside because he doesn't in this Maimer say this concept. He says it's like a kite. I always give an example of a kite. A kite, if there's no wind outside, the kite is going to. You could have a string and you could have all the parts of the kite, but if there's no wind outside, the kite is just going to sit on the floor. You're not going to have. You could run and try to create friction, but you need wind to have a good experience with flying a kite. But at the same time, if your kite has no string and it's very windy, then the kite will just, if the wind rips, then the kite just flies off and there's no control. So it's a combination of the string that you're holding and the wind and the kite. All that together creates an experience where that tension. It's a tension that you have the tension, at the same time you're holding it back. So therefore you're able to have an experience of a kite. That's Ratzeh V'Shuv. That's what it means to have a yearning and return. If the person only has a yearning, it's like a kite without a string. There's no direction. It gets lifted up. You get excited about God, and you just fly away. That happens. Certain people did that. They stopped to live in this world. Couldn't live in this world. They just wanted to be part of God. Shuv is when a person has shuv. Shuv means, well, what does God want? Not what do I want? What does God want? If God didn't want me to, if God wanted me to this, he wouldn't have created me. So why did He create me? He had a purpose, and my purpose is to be in this and to accomplish something. John, I'm just going to put you on mute. Unmute yourself if you want to say something. There's just a little static coming over for some reason. So the tension of shuv is that you have a reason, but the problem is that the different what Avram the Alter Rebbe says that angels also have that. Angels also have ratzah v'shuv. They also have yearning. And then they have a purpose. And angels also creation, right? It's not existing on its own. So it has a purpose. Some angels, their whole idea is to burn out. But what's the difference? They just run like on a wheel. Their whole excitement is just to have the experience of loving God and then doing something about it. But they're not going anywhere. Avram Avinu introduced a new concept that even tension has a reason. What is the tension of yearning and shuv and doing something? is to go somewhere. And where am I going to? To the love. It says that Avram Avinu, he went south. He was moving. The angels don't move. The angels just stay in the same place. They experience ups and downs, but from standing. Avram used that as an energy to move, to do something, to move somewhere. So he says, Avram Avinu had Ratziv V'Shoiv, and because the Ratziv and Shoiv was like the gas, but what do you have gas for? To go somewhere. You're not just driving around in circles. He went south towards the love. So he is halach v'noisea. Angels can't move. They're not mahalach. And where did he go? Lenegva, to the love. So bechinas ratzev v'shuvki ruach, aisi ruach v'amshich ruach. When a person has a spirit, a love towards God, the spirit has a reaction. Every reaction. If a person's loving to someone, then usually, if the person has any kind of connection with that person, you love the person back. If a person's constantly rude and mean to someone, right, you don't feel, why am I still loving this person? The person doesn't love me. So it has to be back and forth. So ruach, I see ruach, your spirit, your love towards God. I see ruach brings back the love of God towards you. Like it says, Im yasiv I love libai. Apply your heart to God. You want God to love you, love Him. But it's not. It's not what you think. Well, is God superficial? It's not superficial. The only reason there's such a thing as response in this world is because God wants to respond to us. Because God responds to us, therefore, there's a concept of response in this world. Where if you love someone, or if you communicate, if you show feelings towards someone, usually, right, says if you talk from the heart, they go into the heart. If you don't really mean what you're going to say, the person who's hearing it is going to feel it, is not going to feel it. You want the person to feel what you're saying, be honest, talk from the heart. So and also, Avram Avinu did crazy acts of kindness. Vayita Eshel, he created an Eshel, whatever the Eshel is, his arguments with the Eshel is. Either he made a tree for people's shade, or he created a hotel for people to live in so that people could have where to eat in the desert. Not only that, he had humility. He didn't have an ego. Avram testified about himself. I'm like dirt and dust. He didn't look at himself as anything. He didn't give himself a credit for doing anything. Through these two acts of tremendous kindness that Avram did, and humility, didn't feel great, didn't have an ego because of his act of kindness. He wasn't trying to get himself on a name on the wall. Is Kamayim Papanim. So God, there's a response to that. So he was able to bring down God by being so humble. He humbled God. And God says, even though I'm infinite, I'm beyond creation, I'm going to humble myself like Avram humbles himself. And it's not about me. I'm going to bring down light and kindness to the world because I'm learning from Avram, so to say. This is an amazing mimer. This mimer says that Moshe is the speaker. God is the responder. God watches us and says, you're being humble, I'm going to be humble. You're being loving, I'm going to be loving. So he says, and through Avram having humility, he was able to bring down Yeridus or in Seif Baruch Hu, the infinite light, the Chacham B'Chesed, to be defined in the attributes of wisdom and kindness that was beyond Hashem before that. Shehu B'chinas Yerida v'Shiflus. This is a descent. And the word shafel means lowering himself, not just descent. And the difference between shiflus and yerida, you could have a person who says, I'm going to be a man, I'm going to be a world person, right? Even though I'm really beyond the world, I'm such a special person. Let me slum it with the rest of the people. But everyone should know that me, as this great guy, is going out, or this great woman is going out to be with regular people. That's not shiftless. That's just, you're trying to be, you want to also be able to say that you're able to be a regular person. Shiftless means you make yourself small. Shafel means small. Make yourself small. Be like one of those people, not just to be amongst those people. So God makes himself Yerida and Shafel. The Gabi Arin Seif, if you want to describe it compared to the infinite light, because God himself is beyond a description of wisdom. God has no midas, he has no attributes, but he lowers himself by responding to us. Like I said before, where you see God as great, there you find his humility. By you understanding greatness in God is because he humbled himself. He made himself shafel. So you should be able to understand his greatness. Otherwise, you wouldn't. It's way beyond our comprehension. So Avram Avinu was able to do it on his own. So here the Rebbe in a mimer I saw, the Rebbe says in a mimer of the same parsha, the Rebbe kind of divides it into three levels, the difference between Avram and after Matan Torah. But the Alter Rebbe puts it all in one thing. How far, where's Avram starting, where is he going? And Avram was able to do this on his own without Matan Torah. But now he says, this is where he says, but Avram Avinu, we go another 10 minutes and I have to stop. Nevertheless, Ikram Shachas Avram Avinu of Shalom, with all what Avram did, but where did he bring it down to? He affected godliness to be brought down, but in higher worlds. And what's the proof? The proof is we have nothing really, besides the Jewish people themselves, there was nothing left of Avram. His wells were covered over. He made many converts. We don't know, there's no sign of who those converts are today, right? In theory, if Avram Avinu had 1,000 converts, right? It says Avram and Sarah made converts. But today there should be billions of people that are descendants of Avram's people. Those people disappeared. But he traveled with Avram while he was alive. So he mainly stayed in the higher worlds. His effect was in the higher worlds. He did bring godliness down to the world. And to have that people should recognize God, like it says, he called out to the world that God is the God of the world. He made people, he converted people, he brought people under the wing of godliness in Charan. It says that Avram traveled with an entourage to Eretz Canaan. He didn't just have people, but they believed in God. He affected them. We can't really, that's just a small understanding of what Avram really accomplished, but his real accomplishments were in the higher worlds. Meaning, he was more effective in God. That godliness went into the mode of being wise and kind. But what he brought down in this world is just like a rishima, a sign of what he's really accomplished. Like I said before, Avram was a smaller circle, so it went only lower. It only stayed within the higher realms. For a person, this is one of the foundations. The lower a person, the more a person could affect in lowness, right? A person that's a tzaddik is a righteous person that could only have a conversation with people that are righteous. That's not a great accomplishment. Righteousness, that's fine. How could you talk to someone who's on the street, the spiritual street, and doesn't know about God and doesn't want to hear about God, and affect that person and change that person? That's much means the higher a person is, the lower a person could be effective. So here also Avram Avinu, though he was effective in this world, but it's not really where his main work was done in heaven. God says about Avram that he did things for me. Mitzvah my commandments. He affected God more than he affected the world. Mitzvah dafka, the Alter Rebbe says. Mitzvah shakadosh baruch hu the mitzvahs that God did. Hakadosh baruch hu mevakar chaylim. This is an amazing thing. Why did God visit the sick? Who inspired God? We look at it, right? It says God came to Avram to visit Avram because he was sick. So we learn from God to visit the sick. But who inspired God to visit the sick? That was Avram. Imagine that Avram inspires God to visit the sick. Why does God visit the sick? It comes from Avram's inspiration. And what does it mean spiritually, the sick? What does it mean to visit the sick? When we say to God, when King Solomon says that I'm sick with love for God, so give me support. Fill that gap that I have, that I feel sick for God. That's real. When God gives a person a connection because you feel sick for God, that's God visiting the sick. What does it mean to be sick for God? Like King Solomon describes. Why do you feel sick? When does a person, what's sick mean? Sick means things aren't the way they should be. Right? When a person's not well, they're not the way they should be. What does it mean that with God, the things are not the way they should be? When there's concealment. Helen Vehester, when there's things are not being revealed, and a person doesn't see godliness, doesn't feel godliness, you feel sick because you're not feeling the revelations. Even all the worlds, the way God fills the worlds and surrounds the worlds, that's only a ray of God. Only the ray of the manifestation is in creation. If that's the case, when a person realizes that the whole creation is not the essence of God, So you become tichsei v'tichle nefesh the davka bein seif baruch mamish. Then you want to get. You say, 1 second. I don't want to settle for manifestations. I want to be connected to the God beyond creation. And a person feels chaylas avasani. You feel sick with love for Hashem. So what does it mean mevaker chaylim? God comes to visit the sick. He answers that call that a person has. And that's what it says. Samchuni bashishus, raftuni betapuchim. Fill my needs and let me lie me a bed of apples, which is all an expression of God's healing the person. Shem inyan his galas are himself. That means revelations of God. Baruch hu mihester v'helim, from concealment. Shigili zeherufu l'chalis ahava. These are all responses to God, but they're in the higher world. Avram Avinu did things on the higher world, and he continues with describing Avram's effect in the higher world. So I'm just going to say one more paragraph. Skip to the last paragraph on this page 16. But in this world, our world, Alma de Pruda, the world of separation, not the world where the question is how much godliness is revealed within godliness itself, so to say. When we are in our world where we feel separate from God, period means separation. A person doesn't recognize. You have to find God in this world, but a person could go their whole life and not acknowledging that there's a God, not acknowledging that there's a God that means something to you personally. From the world of creation, things start to separate. But you want to bring godliness down to this world, in the world of separation. That's why you have to have the Torah. So this is again one of the answers. I said there's a few answers because Avram Avinu again was able to do things on his own, but also what he did was in the higher space. But God didn't create the world so there should be higher worlds of revelation. God created the world that in our darkness, in our places of confusion, in our places of separation, we have to find God. And therefore, he wasn't satisfied with Avram. He says, I'm going to put your people, and in order to do that, we had to go through Egypt. We had to become receptacles to this great revelation. Because in order to change that things that are separate and reveal God in the separation, that's a big chiddush, that's something unique. And that was what happened in Matan Torah. And that's why Rabbi Yosef said that if not for this day, I'd just be another Joe. I'd be another Yosef in the shuk. Why? Because there's a lot of people out in the world that are lost. But how do I find God? How do I, in my separation, have a relationship with God? That's only because of Matan Torah. And how do we do it? Moshe Yadaber v'Hashem Yinenu b'Kol. Moshe has to speak. It has to come. The highest place allows for us to bring that God should come even into the lowest place. And that's how the Maimer continues. That he goes into the Keldei Savaya, the two understandings of what does it mean God. There's God from the place of where a person realizes that God's everything and you're nothing, and the place where you think you're something and God's nothing, right? God has to you have to make space for God, and in that place God wants to be found. Like I always say, God doesn't want to live in Beverly Hills. He wants to live in South Central. He wants you to build him a house, a mishkan in this world. And that's what he told the angels when the angels said, "Give us the Torah." God said, "Why should I give you the Torah? What could you do with the Torah? You're going to make more spirituality in a holy place. You're going to be running around the circle of Ratzi V'Shov." Avram Avinu went south, and he gave the strength for us to go even further south. And that's the beautiful. That's this pasuk is coming to teach us. It says Moshe called God. The pasuk says that Moshe Yadaber, speaking is to call. When you speak, you call someone. He called God, and God responded. And God responds to each and every one of us when we do Torah mitzvahs. And that's what happened on this day. That's what Rabbi Yosef said. And this day I became Yosef. Otherwise, I'd just be another Joe in the market. All right, everyone, I got to run. I have a doctor's appointment. Mir Hashem. Everyone, we'll see you guys at next class. Laila Tov, take care.